Singapore's COVID-19 tracing app has been available since March, with reports around 20% of the population has downloaded it. After originally finding success in minimising the spread of coronavirus, the city-state is now dealing with a sharp second wave outbreak. Yesterday, I spoke with Singapore's Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. I started by asking him about the impact of the app and what lessons we can draw from in Australia.
Contact tracing is an essential part of the epidemic management, but contact tracing remains at the heart of it, a human endeavor. You're dealing with human beings. When a diagnosis is made, I don't believe a smart app should tell you the diagnosis. You need a human being to speak to you, tell you the test is positive, what are the implications, what you need to do, what precautions you need to take. So the first point I wanted to make is that the human being remains at the center of this entire process. The second point is to avoid a false dichotomy between a completely centralized government system where Big Brother knows it all, or a decentralized anonymous system where it's a free-for-all and no one really has an overall view of the data. In our case, we decided to have a few key features in this. First, open source, because we wanted everyone to know what's going on. They could kick it, they could test it, they could try, and they could be sure that there were no backdoors and no other shenanigans going on. Secondly, we avoided this dichotomy between centralized, or completely decentralized, because in effect, our system works by keeping the data private. It's locked up, encrypted in the person's own handphone until and unless he or she turns positive. At that point, a person would speak to the potential patient, explain implications, and seek consent to upload that data. So the point is that we work a hybrid system based on public support, keeping public trust, and maintaining privacy. I think it's very important to have those features because otherwise contact tracing will not work.
Australians were briefed that just 20% of people in Singapore have downloaded the Trace Together app.
Yes.
Is that correct, and why is that?
Well, it's gone up now, I think, a little bit. I think it's about 1.5 downloads. It's still a voluntary exercise, and I would try to keep it for as long as possible on that basis. Secondly, to be frank with you, both Australia and Singapore, because we're using the same protocol, uses Bluetooth proximity data, and there has been some feedback about battery life and the use of Bluetooth technology. So the other thing which we are working on now to supplement this is to develop wearable devices, a little device on the end of a lanyard, which would be working on a battery, which would not drain your battery life, which you would just carry with you as you enter and go around your daily activities. We believe the combination of phones plus these wearable devices will increase the participation rate considerably.
And just to clarify, when you say 1.5, that's 1.5 million out of, is it just 5.6 million?
5.5 million, yes. So it's about somewhere between 20 to 25%.
And do you think that there'll be stronger uptake of the lanyard as opposed to the phone? Do you think it is those user issues, or is it the privacy implications that has people concerned?
I think it's a combination of both user issues primarily, and having a wearable device which people can just leave in the handbag or wear and forget about makes it much easier. So that will help increase participation rate. But again, I want to come back to my first point that it's not just about technology, and you need to make sure the human remains at the center of it all. So maintaining trust, respecting privacy, and getting voluntary participation is absolutely essential.
If we could turn to our trading relationship with Singapore, this is coming at a time when a lot of our foreign relations are quite strained, in particular between Australia and China. What opportunities do you think exist for Australia and Singapore at the moment?
Well, I think Australia and Singapore have a great relationship. If you just think about what's happened over the last few months, I mean, our prime ministers have been on the phone, our prime ministers at a virtual summit. We've settled negotiations for a digital economy agreement, which will come into force later this year. We've been working very hard, I mean, both Maurice and I, making sure that both Australians and Singaporean citizens stranded in various parts of the world can get home. Singapore has been a critical air bridge, a hub for Australians or New Zealanders trying to get home, and also for Singaporeans trying to get home from various parts of the world. So on that front, that has been an excellent, excellent relationship. We've also reaffirmed our commitment to maintaining open supply chains, food, medical supplies, and all the other elements of this global supply chains between Australia and Singapore are working very, very well. I mean, I've just checked with SIA. There are 6 weekly freighter services between Singapore and Melbourne, Singapore, and Sydney, and there are additional services to Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane. So on all these fronts, things are going very, very well. And of course, we've got all the other dimensions, including military relationship and all that, which is really founded on trust. So I would put it to you this way. In a crisis, you know who your real friends are. You know who is dependable, who you can rely on. And I can certainly say from the point of view of Singapore, we found Australia to be an absolutely dependable, wonderful partner. And I believe we've done the same. We've been able to reciprocate that relationship.
And one of the ways that you are reciprocating is this digital economy agreement. Can you tell me what kind of implications is that going to have, in particular when we're trying to restart both Australia and Singapore's economies?
Well, in a sense, COVID-19 has not changed history. I mean, I would quote Richard Haas, of the President of the Council of Foreign Relations in Washington. It's accelerated forces and trends which are already evident before this crisis. And we all know we need to do more in the digital space, and we need to arrive at common standards, mutual recognition, interoperability. And in a sense, this digital economy agreement was building on work that was already necessary, but accelerated by this crisis. So I would expect to see far more in terms of digital trade, digital services, being able to cross borders, fintech, and the rest of it. And the key point is this: for us to be able to interoperate even as we maintain, in a sense, open digital borders.
One of the strains in Southeast Asia at the moment is the relationship with China, though. This is impacting just about every country, but Australia in particular has been under incredible strain after calling for this inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. Do you have any advice for Australia in dealing with China?
Well, I would put it to you this way. The key point is that we're dealing with a clear and present danger from this pandemic. And we've all need to get on and do what we need to do it domestically, and also to work with each other to support one another, to support, particularly when one side or the other is short of supplies or needs emergency assistance, to be able to do that. So actions speak louder than words. And I can say from experience, certainly between Singapore and China, Singapore and Australia, all of us have been dependable partners. So that's the first thing. Don't get distracted by the polemic and the politics of it. Second point is that there will come a time after the emergency phase is over when a proper inquiry, a proper understanding of what happened and whether things could have been done better should and will be done. But don't politicize the process. And there's no point, getting on a soapbox and yelling at the top of the voice. So I think the less said, the more done, and keeping a cool head is most helpful in this scenario.
Singapore's had to deal with another wave outbreak after you were faring pretty well in the beginning.
Yes.
What does recovery start to look like for Singapore? When will you feel like you're on your way to recovery?
Well, I think we are well on our way to recovery. This is now the 7th week of what we call a circuit breaker. It's a kind of a soft version of a lockdown. Our community cases have come down to single digits. We had a problem in our migrant worker dormitories. To quote the WHO, this was like ships on land. We know that there have been problems on luxury cruise liners with 6-star accommodation. There have been problems on aircraft carriers in a military context. And our migrant worker dormitories are the equivalent. Basically, the point is that if you have people working together, interacting closely together, socializing together, cooking meals together, and doing so in close proximity, you have a risk. So that's what happened in our case. And despite the precautions we took, meaning canceling social activities, increasing the level and standards of hygiene, basically this virus was far more infectious than we anticipated. So we had a problem there, but we are now doing extensive tests and isolation. And I'm pretty sure we'll get that it has plateaued and we'll be able to bring the numbers down. So basically, we're looking at a gradual resumption of activities from the first week of June. But we shall do it very, very carefully, very, very deliberately. And one key point worth highlighting in Singapore is that we've had very low mortality rates. So for instance, right now, it's less than 0.1%. Now, this reflects not only the quality of healthcare, but also the fact that we've had extensive testing of everyone, including those without symptoms. And the other point is that we've used this time to build up medical capacity. We've built up contact tracing and isolation capacity, and we've accelerated our ability to be able to trace at scale. All these elements, medical capacity, contact tracing, and testing, are essential prerequisites for effective and safe opening up. And this we have done, and we are pretty confident that we've got these elements in place and we'll be able to open up safely in the first week of June.
And just finally, when you're looking longer term out of the COVID-19 recovery, what do you think is going to be the biggest change in how countries like Australia and Singapore interact with each other?
Well, I think the relationship between Australia and Singapore is going to be even better because we've gone through a crisis together. There's been close communication, close collaboration. Our citizens know, certainly those who are stranded, know that the effective collaboration between Australia and Singapore made a real difference to their lives. The fact that we've been able to settle a digital economy agreement, the fact that we are sharing our latest tools, our latest technology with each other in the midst of a crisis, all this will build trust and will make an already excellent relationship even better. So I'm very confident, and since I'm on the air, I should say a really big thank you to the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the Home Minister of Australia. I mean, you guys have been great and really wonderful partners.
I'm sure they'll be glad to hear it. Minister Balakrishnan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Annalise. Take care.